heaps of work. You can see the number of projects. We have a number of clients outside the continent. We've got a number of startup clients, and those are actually our favorites because they bring us the most difficult and complex questions, and they're always at the edge of innovation. So we really enjoy working with them. As I said earlier, we're a specialist legal and policy advisory firm. So we always say to our clients that if you do get arrested, don't call us, call a real lawyer, because that's not the kind of thing we can really help with. We might even call ourselves a hazard to the legal profession. But when it comes to these topics, on the areas of digital commerce, digital privacy, crime and security, consumer protection, records retention, and those questions that are on the edge of innovation, and especially digital innovation, that's the area that we love to participate in. We do pride ourselves in having multidisciplinary expertise. So you will find us speaking in some depth about technology. We're not computer scientists, but we're immense technology enthusiasts. So we love keeping up with what's going on in the world and out of the labs and so on. So you'll often find us straddling between the legal side and the technology side. A little bit about myself. Over 15 years is complimentary. It's a few more years than that I've been a technology, legal and policy advisor. And many years ago, I started a law firm that became one of the leading firms in South Africa. And that was then acquired by PwC. So coincidentally, I've also had a bit of an entrepreneurship journey and experienced things like exiting and so on. And I worked at PwC and I established a Southern African practice for technology, law and innovation. And when I left PwC, I went to work for ITU for a little bit. They had started the first harmonization project in Southern Africa. And so what we did is review the various laws and policies that existed and what we could do to bring it in line with international standards. And that's really when the transition from a kind of legal space to a more policy space began. Luckily for me, I've traveled, I've had time to write, and also met many friends sitting on expert groups and advisory boards, and very happy now to be leading an awesome team. I'm married to someone named Josh, and I have two little boys, Tristan and Aiden. So when we look at, tech law and policy in Africa, over 20 years, it's been a huge change. I remember that when I started in this field, we still had fax machines. And so if somebody wanted to send you a kind of takedown notice, you could often get a takedown notice coming in on a fax machine, which is hilarious now that I think about it. So you'd hear the sound of a fax machine in the background and you'd still have all your files in little lockers and so on. The concept of a drive didn't exist and the concept of big data didn't exist. So we've come a long way from then. And also I think what we can all agree is that we have seen a number of international influences. So it seems as if the continent has become quite excited with what's happening in Europe and in the States and in Australia and how they've dealt with certain topics. And we've watched think tanks and we've watched position papers and we've been inspired in many ways to bring some of that thinking into the continent. And it's really, really exciting when a big term just hits the continent and then we all start thinking about it, whether it's Bitcoin or artificial intelligence and so on. And at the same time, there's this huge hunger to get our regulatory space up to date because we realize there's some security issues, some privacy issues, electronic transactions, validity issues, and a number of others. And that's what we work on. So lots happening at the national level, but also lots happening at the regional level and at the continental level. And almost always there is the international bodies and influence that bring a number of ideas. And that's kind of the discourse that's happening all around the developments of laws and policies. We have a number of rights and conventions and so on that influence the work we do. I've just named the Charter on Human People's Rights, and then probably the dominant one in the discourse at the moment, the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. And then at the regional level, you'll see that there's also been a number of developments to try and harmonize legislation and bring cooperation between policymakers on how we address this. So this is just a snapshot on some of the developments happening on the continent in terms of looking at where the cybercrime laws are. You can quickly look at the index. The green will tell you where there are substantive provisions, and the yellow being partial provisions, and the red being where there aren't any provisions. And it's not as clear cut as that. Everything's on a spectrum, so there are a number of bulls and so on, but that'll give you an indication of some of the developments. And similarly with consumer protection, you can see a number of dots. When it comes to the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, it's the one that holds the biggest promise to bring Africa up to date with the kinds of legal and regulatory systems that we need. So we have 14 signatures to the convention, 8 ratifications, and it's really one, depending on which country you're sitting in, to have a look at and see what the implications are in terms of how it can inspire changes to the laws that you have. We did a study recently, concluded in 2020, where we worked with 10 countries, geographically dispersed, so central, northern, west, south, and so on, and with and speaking different languages, so Anglophone, Francophone countries. And from the 10 countries, 8 of them had electronic transactions laws. Out of the 10, 9 had data protection laws, and 8 had cybercrime and cybersecurity laws. Now, if we just look back, in 1999, there was no data privacy legislation at all on the continent. And so we have come a significant way. And so it's good to take this step back and see all the activity and what it's amounting to on the continent. And just some concluding thoughts, I think. You know, the various legislation and policies and so on are at various levels, and you don't need expert diagnosis of this, but we are either sitting with laws and policies that could be outdated, some of which are in draft, some of which have been in draft for 10 years. When it comes to certain topics, they are not non-existent. And then we have various excellent documents that have not been implemented. And I think these are the kinds of things that we really need to think about if we are going to influence the regulatory landscape and make sure that we are responsive as we should be. Then these are the kinds of things that we can think about. Yep. Thanks. That's just a few introductory thoughts from me, Chinenye, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Priya. That was really insightful. So we're going to move to our next panelist. I just want to say thank you to everyone who is just joining us. I can see the comments in the chat box, people from all over the country and different parts of Africa and the world. So I'm happy to have you guys. So I'm going to move on to Baha. And, you know, the world has changed, you know, and the world will never be the same, especially with the impact of COVID-19. We now have people embracing technology now more than ever. Zoom, for instance, the platform that we're on, has, you know, witnessed a lot of growth, and they've made a lot of profits because everyone is having their business meetings and their social gatherings and everything on Zoom, especially during the heat of the pandemic and when everyone was on lockdown.
I'm not sure if it's just me or you froze at the end there.
Oh, apologies. So my question is, what inspired you to set up a robotic law firm? Sorry, I think I have an incoming call, so interrupting my call. I mean, this is one of the downsides of technology, but yeah. So what inspired you to set up a robotic law firm? Can you tell us more about it? Some of the challenges and some of the successes that you've had. Thank you.
You know, I'm not going to have some huge noble reason for when I first started it. I started it for myself. You know, I started it to help myself. I think everybody here is a lawyer, and you understand like the process of law itself is quite boring, and it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of things to do. I mean, we talk about really exciting legislation and really cool new things that are coming out about, I don't know, cryptocurrency, insurance, whatever it is, especially here in the US. But at the end, how do all of these things get implemented by lawyers and papers and, you know, boring processes that are usually the most time consuming? That's why it takes a really long time, not just to draft legislation, but also to implement it. So for me, I was just out of school. I had litigated for a few years, and litigation was really not for me anymore. And I wanted to start a transactional practice. So when I started my practice, I didn't want to have an office. I wasn't making enough to hire a bunch of staff. So I got creative and I thought, how could I grow? How could I grow my firm, especially doing what I was doing, being immigration and having clients all over the world? How can I use what exists to kind of streamline the process and postpone having to hire a big team or getting a big office for as long as I can? And I could say until now, I have never gotten an office for my law firm. I work with a network of people who work similar to me. They also don't work at offices. We all have flexible work schedules because of the beauty of getting together this way. Whether it's on video calls or some sort of, automation tools to actually help the work. But I will say, like, the most difficult thing wasn't finding what to automate, wasn't technology, wasn't any of the difficult things that is first pops to mind when you think of automation. For me, it was really taking care of my clients. Like, what am I gonna do now to compensate for the fact that I don't have this constant face-to-face or the drop-bys at the office where they could see the pictures of my family and, you know, my degrees and have that connection with me. So that's been the biggest part to overcome and get creative with.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very important point that you just made, the need to use social media and have pictures of yourself, your family, to make you sort of relatable to the client. I think that is one of the challenges that we face, especially now that we're trying to do more virtual meetings. A lot of clients or potential clients are like, we need to meet you, we need to build a relationship before we can trust you. You know, we need to come and know your office. And it's really interesting that you said you've never had an office space before. I wonder if, do you think that some people might have turned you down because of that? Or you don't think that it's been an issue for any of your clients or potential clients?
You know, when I first started, I got really creative with it. So when I first started, I would make office visits to my local clients. And the rest of them, like I said, I worked with international companies. So they weren't local to know where I am, but I did always come with preferences. Like when I first started, I did zero marketing. I could say up until this point, I've done very little, if any, paid marketing. So all of my clients were coming through referrals or current clients. So there wasn't like any red flags raised in that sense. As far as an office space, I did have office space at some point, but it was for a different business. But for the law firm, really, it depends on your practice area. I did a project with some college students just this week who are undeclared, 3 of them undeclared, really interested in law and this technology area of law and something they could do that fits within their age group of how they can market themselves. And most of what we ended up talking about is how different the lifestyles are and how different the actual work is, depending on what area of law are you interested in. Now, for me, working with the type of people I work with are similar to myself. They're IT founders, they're digital nomads, they're creators, they're also kind of on the go with their laptops everywhere. Like, for example, for Mark's yesterday, we were doing a prep for this, and he was constantly in court. I'm not sure if the same would apply, but for most areas of law, it does apply. You can get creative with setting up your own way of life and practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next speaker. Priya, just prepare. Next question I'm going to ask you has to do with branding, especially building your personal brand and how to connect with them, you know, and also I'm going to touch on a bit of the science as well. Like, what does a robotic law firm entail? Does it mean that robots are talking to you, or does it mean that robots are drafting the contract, and so on and so forth? So before we get to that, I'm going to move on to Max. Max actually has experience in corporate commercial law, and he's also very good with litigation and arbitration. Before I ask this question, I'm going to say a bit of background about myself. I used to work in a core litigation firm. In fact, when I got out of law school, I joined, it was a top tier firm, it's still a top tier firm in Nigeria. However, after a short time there, I got a bit restless, and not because I didn't like the firm, but it was just because I was frustrated with litigation in Nigeria. So we would go to court early in the morning and would stay till 4 or 5 p.m. sometimes before our matter gets heard. And I always wondered, why can't you just log on to a portal and have it, you know, tell you what time your case will be called? Why do you have to sit the whole day in court? Sometimes the court might not even sit. Sometimes the judge might rise, and then you have to basically adjourn the matter and come back another day. It just felt like a waste of time. You know, I felt like I could be doing other things with my time. And that's the reason why I left the firm and I actually took a break from litigation for a while. So Max, being someone who uses the court system a lot, and we're talking about the future of law, I know that other parts of the world have moved further than we have, but I'd just like to know what your point of view is on, you know, with technology and the bench, especially. How can we leverage on technology to increase access to justice, basically? You're muted.
Apologies, can you hear me now? Thank you so much, Ine, for that question. And it's fitting you are asking me that question on a day I'm stuck somewhere in court. I've been in court all day long. And it's quite a pain that we still have this challenge. I mean, yesterday I was in court till 5:30 p.m. Today I'm still in court and it's already 4:30 p.m. and it looks likely like I'm set to be here likely till 6 p.m. And it's a challenge because justice itself, actually, there's an element of speed to justice. Once that element of speed is lost, then to a large extent, the essence of justice itself is lost. So for those of us who do litigation particularly, it's a huge challenge. I know it's a challenge everywhere in the world, but if you look at it from the bottom line approach, you'd see that technology actually is on hand and it's able to sort out a lot of the challenges we have with the justice sector, enhancing efficiency and speed of justice. And of course, there are lots of situations we have at the moment that really underscore this point. I mean, we had some of the unrest, lately in Nigeria, and then a court building, the oldest court building actually in Nigeria, which originally was the first Supreme Court building built in Nigeria. Then I think if I get my history right, in 1928, and that building was burned down 2 or 3 weeks ago. And you can imagine that in that building was housed the probate department, where wills were stored. All of those wills were destroyed in that fire. Archives and records of cases, case files and all were burned down in that blaze. And it means there's really no way to get those documents back. So except, somehow they're able to build some of those records from the private copies held of those records, which of course means people could, bring in documents that are fictitious or fake documents into that process. So it tells you the challenge, and the fact that having technology on hand, unfortunately, the law is always slow about the way it goes about doing things. So I mean, in Nigeria, for instance, we had a time where it was even difficult to, produce in court a document that is produced, say, from a digital photograph. They would ask you to know you have to bring the negatives, which, comes from the old era of photography, not the modern digital photography where there's no negative. So when you have those kinds of challenges, it just behoves on, players in the justice sector to really wake up, see the potential technology as. For instance, why am I in court all day long? Because the judge has to take down in longhand everything the lawyers say. So you have to, speak slowly. You say a sentence, you let the judge write, and then you take your next sentence. But imagine with something as simple as voice to text. It simply means with a voice to text recorder. I mean,
I think Max is having some technical issues. Max, are you still with us? We might have to move quickly to Priya and just give Max some time to sort out his connection issues. So Priya, let's talk about some of the practice areas.
And the court officials get the transcript of it.
Hey, Max, can you hear us? If you can hear us, please, you can turn up your video so it might improve your bandwidth. Okay, so Priya, can you tell us a bit about some of the practice areas that ENCODE is specialized in? Some people might be joining us, they might not be lawyers, and they want to know, we're lawyers, what kind of services can a technology law firm offer us? Can you shed more light on some of the practice areas and some of the services that you offer?
I think there's a slight delay with Max. Maybe I don't know if the host could turn off his mic for a little bit.
And then they'll maybe.
All right, I think he just disconnected. So Priya, you can answer the question. Apologies for the technical glitches.
No worries. This is the world we live in. We can add one to our Zoom stories. I think day to day technology law just changes. So what we did over time just continuously evolves, and so it's quite a dynamic field. But if you are not a lawyer, or if you're thinking about becoming a technology lawyer, I think one of those core skills you need is to be able to give assurance either to technology companies or to people acquiring technology. And people will ask questions such as, how does this deal with, or how does this help me with regulatory compliance from a privacy perspective? Or does this comply with the security regulation that is exposed to, and so on? So I think that voice of counsel and assurance is something that you always need to be able to provide, to be able to connect the dots between technology implementation and someone who is selling technology to how this works in an enterprise or in an organization. And that, I think, is the bread and butter. So to be able to connect those dots. And then, of course, there are things like drafting agreements and licenses and so on. And I think within that, one really has to become, in this particular field, a little bit of a writer and a little creative, because while other lawyers might have templates and thousands of templates to pull off a library that they can use as the first ground, often we are writing a contract or a terms and conditions or some kind of disclaimer for a technology that is completely new. And so while we might be able to leverage language that mitigates risk and liability, when we are actually drafting, we are drafting as if we are fictional writers. So I think the ability to rely on your language and ability to draft is something that is paramount for a technology lawyer. It isn't always the case that you will be able to find precedents and templates that can inspire your work. I think the work that I'm engaged in most of the time now is on the policy front. And so trying to find the gaps in innovation, between innovation and where our policy and regulatory landscapes are. And I really enjoy that because it helps me keep in touch with, with the digital innovation, and also for me to perhaps, inspire new policy and legislation responses. So, but there's a whole stream of things. So I think you have to get very used to drafting policies, giving that assurance and counsel, and ultimately just helping people with the fear of technology. So you are that guide and that avatar that is just walking that path with them as they bring in technology and giving them that assurance and counsel.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please, Baha, and I'll follow up with another question for you. Go ahead.
My experience working in technology, both in technology and outside, has been the biggest thing is to be able to connect with your clients, meaning you have to understand the basic lingo and use some of the basic lingo. So it doesn't need to be a practice of law or legislation. If you're truly actually interested in technology, read the news. Read the technology section of the news and understand the basics of what's happening. Like if you're in, I don't know, you're interested in cryptocurrency, read about it. You'll understand the logic of it. Like you don't need to be an expert in anything by all means, but any industry you want to work with, you want to be able to speak that language and connect not just with the lawyer of that company. Of course, with the lawyer, you can connect because you're speaking specifics, but to be able to connect with the COO, with the CEO, with the C-level, especially if it's their CTO or someone in the company, you'll have a much better relationship and you're able to bring ideas that could be financially valuable. You know, people in IT and the company, they might not rely on the attorney, for example, to bring an idea that's revenue generating. But the licensing agreement, for example, that Priya just talked about, that's a new form of revenue creation for the company, and ideas of who they can license to, if they get intellectual property protection, what kind of, how their assets grow. So some of this has nothing to do with actual law, but they're kind of ideas that are based in creativity that she's explaining so well how important creativity is, but also just diverse knowledge. So diversifying your knowledge is likely my biggest advice to anyone going into this area of law.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments. I see that Max is currently struggling with his internet connection, and hopefully it stabilizes soon so that he can give us his thoughts. So I want to get to the heart of this conversation. We've talked about the future of law and emerging trends, and we have things like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and the way the world is going, we're going to get to a point where people are going to rely mostly on smart contracts. So you have you put in a contract into the system, and you say, for instance, you want to draft a will, for instance. Let me not talk about contract now, let me talk about a will. And then you say, by the death of so and so person, his children will get his properties and his the inheritance. And because it's a smart contract, it's the blockchain technology obviously is tied to the the registries where you have the death certificates issued. You have the registries where you have people's birth certificates or marriage registries and so on and so forth. And everything is all automated. And then you see the contract activates on its own and so on and so forth. And some people are worried because they're like, by the time courts start using blockchain technology, by the time we start using smart contracts, what happens to lawyers? Will robots, in quotes, take over the jobs of lawyers? Because you find that with technology, there's efficiency. So something that would take 5,000 people to do, you might only need 5 people to do. So being a lawyer yourself, what would be your thoughts on that subject? And I would also like to know, how does a robotic law firm function? What is the day-to-day for people who have not, who don't know much about it? And then after you explain that, you can now tell us what your thoughts are on the argument of technology taking away the jobs of lawyers in the future.
I'm assuming all of those questions were for me. I will take them. So a robotic law firm is not really as fancy as it sounds. It's not robots holding your hand. It's not the way it works. Anything that a human being doesn't do, in my mind, is robotic. So Gmail is robotic. Google Calendar is robotic. Now, how do you connect all of these pieces so you have to do less work? So for example, appointment scheduling. Imagine if a client wants to schedule an appointment with you in a normal setting. The firm would call, or they would call the firm, likely be placed on hold, receive a call back, check your calendars both to see what's available, talk about it, schedule it, write an email, include a Zoom link, send it. Now, if we were to, count all of these steps on our hand, what is it, 10 steps for one appointment scheduling? And this is, let's say, the heart or the core of the practice of law. So how many hours a day are spent just doing this? Or for example, finding a document. How many hours a day? I think there are statistics that says lawyers spend something like, 10 hours a week just searching for things. So these are the types of things that aren't legal work. Like, let's be honest. These are the types of things, anything that robots replace deserve to be replaced. Because if a robot can do it, why do you want to waste human creativity, talent, skills, brain capacity to do something that a robot can do? So a lot of activities like that are completely automatable. Now, the way I've done it recently, I rebuilt my firm again. It's still in development, but when I analyzed like where we are with a pandemic globally, how people are living, like, are they spending more times on their computers, on their laptops, on their iPads, or on their phones? Like, you kind of see, at least from the people around yourself and the people you want to work with, kind of what kind of lifestyle they're living. So for me, it became really important to have a phone app. Prior to that, it was just a web portal. And it also became important to me to get rid of a lot of the minor tasks, like this appointment scheduling or something, because I want to work more and more with people in different time zones. And really, I don't want someone to not get an answer back within another 24 hours when they just needed a consultation. So there's a phone app. There's a phone app for all of that. There's education aspects of things. Like, for example, before an appointment, if I don't have to spend 15 minutes explaining something that I know is online everywhere, but everybody wants to hear the attorney's opinion. So just like you're recording this and it's on YouTube, I do the same. I record that 5 to 10 minutes and I include it with what that service is. So the person comes informed and actually asks me questions that they want to ask instead of me talking at them for 10 minutes. So it's not necessarily AI and robots and this, what you consider legal technology. For me, it's all about customer service. We're a business, we're providing a service. Customer service is number one. How can I make it easier for the customer, and of course easier for me personally, because I don't want to do non-legal work. I want to spend my time having these in-depth conversations and analysis with clients. And the other part of technology is everything that I just talked about gets organized in one place. So I don't have the problem in my private practice of, for example, what Marx is describing, of having to wait there for a judge to write down what happened. Of course, the court system here is similar. It's not that technologically advanced. This is a problem globally, but at least in our own personal practices, we could get rid of a lot of work. Like, if I was in Mark's position, I would just type my argument and give him a copy so he doesn't have to type it while I'm there. But you can come up with small solutions on your own. Now, the last question was, are robots going to take our jobs? I think robots are going to take jobs that are 100% repetitive. and robotic in nature. I think as lawyers, our job isn't that. Our jobs is analytics, is our thinking process. And wisdom and analytical thinking will never, ever be replaced by robots. So if the more of this crap jobs we can get rid of, the more we can refocus the lawyers on, for example, proper legislation or testing methodologies of these legislations, or some new creative clauses instead of using, like Priya was discussing, this library full of clauses without any analytical thinking. So I think the legal industry will become more competitive, and I think it needs that competition. So I welcome all of these robo baby lawyers, you know, just like first year, second year, up until you're the 5th year of practice, you're kind of the baby lawyer being managed. So, you know, treating these robotic assistants the same way and giving them the beginning and entry jobs and really focusing on negotiations and growth and creativity is what will move the legal industry forward.
Yeah. Bahar, that really struck a chord with me, and I think it I think we're going down a philosophical path now in terms of where we'll end up with the future of the law. But as you say, it's such unprecedented times. The kind of automation that we're experiencing, the kind of access to data that we have, the kind of processing capability, what we're witnessing from a machine learning perspective, it makes you very excited about opportunities. And I think I'm something of a hybrid between an activist and a scientist. So I can happily go and try and pick it to change the law, or I can be in a lab trying to figure stuff out. But I think I'm also constantly reminded then of what the law professors used to teach us at university, just that sometimes if somebody came to you and they have an issue, like they're about to get divorced or they're thinking about getting divorced, and that role that you play before you actually get into the law, that role that you play to have tissues ready or to offer just that conversation and talk to someone. And I think the same also applies to the future of law. So we have to find new values for lawyers. And I think we've also gotten, in a way, just used to being the kinds of lawyers that can sit in our offices and do our work and attach a fee to it. But maybe questions for us is, what is the value that we can place now on human judgment in a particular scenario? So if there's a particular labor dispute, for instance, and there's two sides and you need to exercise that kind of judgment. Or what is the value of experience? What's the value of sentiment? What's the value of perception? So if you're in a room, because I think we're also migrating towards the ease of doing business virtually, but what is the value of being present in a space and being able to take in around the emotions of the room and so on? And does that feature in part of what the lawyer has to do? So I think we're also going to have to develop some new skills. We're going to have to teach ourselves to bring out certain values that we didn't need before. We could hide behind a beautiful office and a beautiful PowerPoint and so on. And maybe we're going to have to get in touch with our humanity a little bit more.
I think that's a great point. I think empathy is the biggest quality that attorneys need to work on now. I mean, attorneys used to be called counselors. Counselors help to solve all sorts of problems, legally being the main one, the one that they go to. But there are a lot of issues that the best solution isn't necessarily legal. So that counseling, problem-solving approach, increasing empathy, and it's more important than ever to work on your personal values and your empathy and connecting with people, because it might have been easier when you had someone in your office for an hour or 2 hours and you got a good, a fat check for that 1 hour that you spent half of it drinking tea and half of it chatting away and checking your phone or email while the client was telling a story. That doesn't work anymore. Even in our own, see how interrupted we got. But we still understand, we're present enough to understand the point that person was trying to make, to clarify it and connect and move on to the next thing. And this is a skill that's kind of, I don't want to say has gone away. I feel like if we can look at the industry in the same way that if robots are capable of doing so much of the job, and we've as lawyers been doing all of this robotic job, that just contributes with empathy subsiding, because you've been turned into some stress ball who has to repeat things over and over and over again, or you get yelled at by your boss, or you have these, unrealistic billing requirements. You can't blame the lawyer after all of that schooling and examining and debt to now live this life of automation. So with a little bit of help, with just equipping lawyers with just a little tiny support, like for me, you don't understand, this appointment scheduling might sound like a really small thing, but it took so much off my plate. I felt so much calmer and less stressed. That means I have time to spend that with my clients and be more patient, even if they're complaining, even if what they're saying doesn't make sense, even if for an hour I get off the phone and I'm going nuts, but I got 3 hours of my day back because of something that I helped myself on. And that 1 hour ends up being the make it or break it, that the client stays with you, or the client hands you 10 other clients that now you don't even have to spend any money on marketing. So empathy, coming back to just empathy and kindness and being kind to people being the basis of building a legal business is really interesting and actually works.
I love the fact that this is a webinar about the future of law, and I'm sure a lot of people tuned in to hear all about the technology, but honestly speaking, I feel like the principles remain the same. And when you talk about empathy and kindness, and I would add humility, those principles would really set you apart. That's what makes the difference, because there are 1 million lawyers out there, right? A lot of lawyers out there, but then it's being able to build that trust and that confidence. And sometimes, like you said, it's just, if you can automate the process a little bit to give yourself more time to be able to do the things that actually matter. So thank you so much for pointing that out. Max is back. His internet looks stable, so we're going to give it another go. And Max, I just want you to complete your thoughts that you were saying before, and also just touch on, using technology for dispute resolution as a whole. Because of the fact that transactions are happening more online now. You have e-commerce, you have a lot of fintech companies. People are talking more about things like online arbitration or even predictive justice. So what do you think about these innovations in dispensation of justice and all that? And then what do you think about how people like us in this jurisdiction can maybe help to fast track that process of having the courts, become more tech friendly? I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well now.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, excellent. Thanks so much, and apologies again for my poor connection. Yeah, so just to finish up my thoughts at the last time, tying up what I was saying to the topic of this webinar, the future of law. Certainly with the things that have happened, even in jurisdictions like Nigeria, where the courts are slow to pick up on innovation, with what has happened, I'm sure the policymakers would see that, we can't continue the way we have continued for a while. So technology is going to begin to play a lot more of a role in dispute resolution. And really with dispute resolution, I believe same thing also play out confirmed in South Africa, in the US. Most systems are built on, precedents, or what we call stare decisis, which is justice is built on predictability, what the judges say before, and what is the facts of the case now, and then try to let what had happened before, what the judges said before, control the current dispute we have, just to create that form of predictability, and people can be sure of the state of things when they enter into legal relationships. So, and I'm just trying to tie that down to what you've said about predictive justice. Predictive justice actually is also a new frontier in law, where beforehand we know already to an extent what the law is going to be. So, for instance, there's some AI, there's an AI platform for arbitration now, where what they do essentially is that you feed in your disputes. Of course, typically simple disputes, you break them down into simple questions. you feed them in, and based on that, the algorithms of AI is able to generate what it believes would be, be the decision if your matter went before an arbitrator. So it's a sort of early neutral evaluation. So it tells you upfront, look, you don't have a chance in this case, or maybe you have 70% chance of getting a favorable outcome in this case. So that way, you save a lot of time, and you could make decisions and say, look, if my chances are really that poor, then I would rather not go into the arbitration. I'll just call a mediation or a negotiation meeting and sort out issues and just settle at that point. So we need to see a lot more of that in litigation, because whether we like it or not, part of the problems a lot of courts have is that the dockets are overcrowded. Commercial transactions have reached an all-time high, and I think this cuts across every jurisdiction. So we have too many cases in the court system. So if we have some of these things work efficiently, then it means the court system is going to be freed up of a lot of burden, and then it's able to spend more time on what is really important, and then less time. I mean, just like what Bar has said, I mean, a lot of times in court, for instance, we spend 10 minutes just trying to agree on a convenient date, all the parties and the court. So the lawyer to the claimant says, look, I'm not available the first week of January. The lawyer to the defense says, I'm not available the third week of January. The court says, I'm not available the fourth week of January. And then we go back and forth on that for 10 minutes. But imagine, like Bar said, if we use Google Calendar, for instance, and everybody just plots that in, and it quickly tells us what is a convenient date. That would save so much more time. And then we spend more time on the substance of what brought us to court. So I agree that the future of law, these things have to be embraced. And I mean, we just don't have an option anymore. And in a sense, I'm happy about the things that have happened recently. It's really going to force us to make that change. And I believe with that change, we'll have, particularly in dispute resolution, a more efficient process that works for everyone. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I never knew that there was a time, or that I never knew that I'd be able to witness courts in Nigeria have virtual hearing.
Yeah.
Like I said in the beginning of my profession, I hated, most days I hated going to court. Some days I would enjoy it if they had like some interesting cases and they had good lawyers in court who were arguing. But most times it was just about adjournment and waiting for long hours. And with COVID-19 and the impact of COVID now, they're seeing the importance of adopting technology. And we hope that, because I know that before this session, I spoke to one or two judges and they said they were going to join. We hope that we're able to also encourage them to adopt some of these processes in the adjudication of justice, basically. So we're going to go on to some lighter issues. It's almost 5 p.m. here in Nigeria. Thank you to all our participants that have stayed on. I think this webinar is going to last 30 more minutes. The Q&A box is open. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please feel free to put the questions on the Q&A box so that we can take a few of the questions before the end of the webinar. Now to the softer issues. A part of technology obviously has to do with social media, right? The reason I knew about Baha actually on Instagram. And I went through her page and I was like, wow, is this really a lawyer? She's so fashionable. I liked her haircut and her makeup and everything. And I was like, wow. I mean, it's you can actually be a lawyer and be happy, because that's her tagline, happy lawyer. And that's the power of social media, being able to connect with people who are different parts of the world. Priya, for instance, I met a colleague of hers on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has done wonders for my career, if I may say so, because, with COVID-19 and people not being able to travel from one place to another, you don't go for as much conferences and events. And LinkedIn has been fantastic for networking. I've met a lot of like-minded people. I'm exploring lots of opportunities that have come out of LinkedIn. However, in some places like Nigeria, and I think other parts of the world, we had a conversation about this with Baha. Some of our rules of professional conduct do not allow for maybe soliciting or some forms of advertisement and so on and so forth. So I'd like all the panelists to speak on the use of social media as lawyers. We can't run away from it. It's our new normal. Most marketing is done on social media. So I'd like to know, each panelist's thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay. Could I start off with that, Chine?
Okay, you can start and then.
Okay, yeah, excellent. So, I mean, in Nigeria, we've had a lot of challenges with lawyers understanding the rules around advertising legal services and promoting their practice. And the challenges have stemmed from, I would say, misconception of the rules we inherited from England on advertisement by lawyers. Of course, the foundations and the history of the legal profession was very clear. Lawyers were not supposed to advertise. It was thought to be below the dignity of the honorable profession to have lawyers running around trying to win clients to themselves. And then there also was an element of thought that lawyers, of course, had specialized knowledge, and clients didn't have that level of knowledge. So therefore, it would kind of place the parties on equal bargaining terms to have the lawyers breathing down on clients and advertising to them. But however, as the world changed, I mean, those rules were formulated in England, of course, long ago in the 14th, the 15th century. And that was because then lawyers practiced communally. So you go to a community, there was one lawyer, just like you go to the community of the one doctor. He was well known. He didn't need to advertise. Everybody knew him. So there wasn't really a need to advertise, as it were, at that time. But because the world has gone commercial, the world has become, globalization has made it easier. And then, of course, easier and faster means of transport has made it easier for people to move around a lot.
Oops, I think
More
his
efficient.
internet is
Because of that,
frozen.
you now have this. The profession has grown.
Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me
The
now?
internet was frozen,
Okay,
but you
thank
can
you.
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So with the modern world, what we have in Nigeria, the current rules actually has two elements, which I think a lot of people, have not taken time to properly read and understand. The first element is it says lawyers, you can advertise or promote your practice in any way, provided you don't do certain things, you don't, slander other lawyers, you don't try to, lie, of course, about the quality of your work, you don't, make your advertisements so, so constant that they become an annoyance, the target. But what is forbidden in Nigeria actually is soliciting for professional employment. Of course, soliciting there simply means begging. So, bugging people and saying, look, retain us, we'll do you a deal, and all of that. But once you don't cross that line, then you are safe and good. So in comes social media, and social media has become an opportunity, particularly for startup lawyers and for younger lawyers. I mean, the older lawyers already have their names well known, and somehow they don't need as much publicity to get themselves out there, what they do, who they are, their personality, and all of that. But what social media does for lawyers is to help put out your personality in a way that allows clients connect with you. And like I tell people, as a lawyer, you're in the business of people, really. You're not in the business of selling legal services. People buy into and pay a lawyer because of your personality, your knowledge, your ability, and that feeling. I mean, Bar and Prayer have talked very well about empathy. There's a sense to which empathy really is one of the key things that make a client retain you. When they feel you understand their pain, you know exactly what the issues are, then they feel like even if I don't go to court, if he's in court, he feels my pain, so he will be able to express my anxieties the way I would express them. Then that way there's created, a trust relationship between solicitor and client. And then that's when a client is willing to commit in trust to the lawyer, his legal problems, and hopes and knows that because he knows you feel his pain, you'd find a solution. But so it's important to understand that context of social media, because we need to put a balance. I see a lot of times that lawyers sometimes miss the point on social media. That social media helps you actually put out your personality. But you also need to put out a professional personality, because indeed you are a professional. But sometimes I think some professionals go a little too far. They put out too professional appearance, and then you don't look human. You're just like a robot. You're efficient. Everything is just, there's no humanity in the way you put yourself out. Then also is the other side of the balance, which is where you are too loose on social media. There's too much of too much of informality, and then there's no professionalism beyond it. So there just needs to be a balance in the middle of the road where you put out, I'm a professional, but at the same time, I'm a human being. I know your pain. I'm also a human being. I feel your pain. And I believe that balance is what helps people to connect with you and to relate with you. So social media is a great tool, but then, there's some caveats around how you use it. You must use it right to, convey the right message and, to be able to win the trust of clients. So I believe Priya can hear from you as well.
Yes, go ahead, Priya.
I think for me, the golden rule on social media is don't do anything you'll regret. So when you wake up the next morning and you see this picture, because I think, there's lots of, as Max was saying, that level of informality. And on the one hand, there is this hunger to understand personalities and who is this person that I am trusting with for opinions and advice. And I want to feel that I know this person before I trust them. So I think there is that element, as there has always been. And then at the same time, the line can be crossed. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, if tomorrow I meet this very same person and we have to have a discussion that's going to affect their share price, or tomorrow I'm going to meet someone and we have to do something very quickly to prevent the unlawful arrest of a journalist, or someone sitting in front of me and they have questions around whether their child has been exploited, on the internet, a young child. So keeping in mind that tomorrow could bring very, very serious questions, changes to the taxation regime could be the end of a company in a particular jurisdiction. The questions can be very, very serious. Tomorrow, when that very same person is sitting across me, can we take it back to that level after I've been on social media and they have seen different sides of me? So it's something, I suspect that I might be older than a number of people on the chat today, but it's the kind of thing that crosses my mind in terms of what tomorrow will bring and whether I will regret this photo. Yeah. So yeah, Chinenia, that's the kind of thing, honestly, that just crosses my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we can move to Baha now, and Baha, your Instagram page, like I said, is really amazing and very colorful. I want you to talk about building a brand, personal brand in general, because Priya and Max talked about that. The fact that, people need to know enough about you to trust you, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you don't do something that you would regret. How have you been able to build your personal brand and a followership using social media? And are there any tips that you can give other lawyers?
I'm going to say something that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. I think before anyone does anything, whether it's social media, implementing technology, anything, you have to understand your personal why. Why do I want this technology? What's the problem it's solving? Why do I want to do social media? Why is this important to me? And it requires you to know yourself, and that determines what you put out there. Like, what Priya is saying is true. It's a very traditional advice. It's our generation. I'm in your generation, which is the both generation of we've lived with and without. So we have a little bit of a different eye when it comes to social media, and a different culture when it comes to social media of what you share and don't share. Like the generation after us, that's their life. They're okay with 24/7 streaming. So my client base kind of falls in between. Who I want to work with, who is like-minded with me, kind of falls in between. So just defining the type of people I want to work with changed my outlook on how I want to do it, which gives me a little bit more freedom. I don't have to explain myself. My client base isn't the 70-year-old person who would say, oh crap, like she was wearing this or she did this to her hair, I don't want to talk to her. Like what you put out also filters who you work with. So the why is really important. I didn't really attempt to build a brand. It kind of just happened. I was actually always a little bit more shy and was trying to build corporate brands. I focused a lot on my creations to build a brand. And somehow or another, I was the one who was remembered or got more followers and more engagement on my personal stuff. So it kind of, that's the way it worked. And it also worked with my personality type because I didn't want to be restricted with just one project. So this way it kind of worked. As far as what I share, I have influencer clients, I have blogger friends who professionally do this. Like, my account is child's play compared to these people with millions of followers and know what they do. For me, I didn't treat it as I'm a blogger and influencer, I have to build this. I look at it as, first of all, my page that's there is my personal page. It's the thing that's open is the same thing that my family and friends follow me and interact and engage with me. So I don't share things I wouldn't want to share. Whatever I put out publicly is what I choose to share of my life. What's important to me, what means something to me, what's fun to me, what's my hobby, what's my work, who are my friends. Like, that's what I put out is that there are now pieces of content that are very strategic. We talked about the advertising restrictions that you guys have. The US has the same. It's extremely restricted. When you talk about the word soliciting, here it means kind of that the culture is, the understanding is, because of the lawyer's education and knowledge of the law, you're considered to be not in a fair negotiating position with the clients because you know more. And there's a lot that go into that. But this applies when you're asking for an exchange. You're paying for an advertisement to drive traffic through your doors. My social media started as just information. Like, I like talking to people about subjects that's interesting to me. Like, I'm really excited about this webinar we're in right now. It's early morning. I'm up early. I have a lot to say about it. So my social media is also that way. Some of the strategic content that's very educational, like, kind of raises a red flag with me. I like to share it. And now more and more, I'm focusing on sharing more real substantive content, like teaching, for example, a business owner why it's important to have a business structure, or what even a licensing agreement is. Now, when you get purely educational, like the US ethics and ABA rules started catching up with purely educational and social media, and not marking it as an advertisement because you're required to. But if it's genuinely purely educational, it's my personal page, has nothing to do with my law firm, I kind of walk the line, right? So if it's a subject or something you're passionate about and you want to teach it, you want to volunteer, you want to share videos of your, webinars and panels and things that you do in that way, I think it's okay with the law. At least so far it is here. So my social media and my branding strategy has always been to share pieces of my life and great pieces of knowledge and law. And also it's my own talking referral account, right? So if anybody wants to see who I follow, who follows me, or who engages with me, my clients' friends see it, or they forward it to each other. That's also a way to build a community. And building that community was important for me. There are people who are in my community that I know that I've never worked with as an attorney. And that's not to say I won't one day. They're still sending me clients, even though they've never worked with me. So building a community and having this empathy with people, whether they can pay me or not, is, I think, has been my most important my most important investment and really resource that my firm has.
Thank you so much, Baha. I think everyone has sort of touched on the issue of social media. My personal take is that we can't hide from it. I personally am a shy person, and initially my accounts were on private for a very long time. But recently, I decided to open up my Instagram account. And, now, when I look back at some of my friends who were a bit more active many years ago, they've grown a huge followership. A lot of them get paid, paid to advertise things, post pictures. And when we talk about the future of work, these are some of the things that we're referring to. You have people, brands, corporate brands like banks and, telecoms companies and so on, who prefer to even use social media influencers now as opposed to using the typical models or celebrities, because they know the power of influence. And when you have these influencers just talk about, your brand or talk about your business, it drives the followership, and sometimes it really drives their patronage. So it's come to stay. And I believe that, as the future of work, as we experience this new normal in quotes, would have to adapt and figure out ways to use social media to our advantage. I like the idea of sharing, informative materials, posting videos, educative videos, and even engaging with potential clients, because sometimes people like to do live sessions where they take questions from the followers or the audience. And really, I think it's a very useful way of marketing our services and our businesses as well. So that leads me to the next question. How do you build a law firm for the future? What do you need to have? I mean, let me touch on a personal challenge that I have right now. My office space, it's nice, it's beautiful. I wish I could just give you guys a little tour. You can see like the whole place and the views and everything. However, I find that I'm in the office less and less. During the pandemic, the office was closed for about 4 or 5 months. And even when it opened, I literally had to force my colleagues and myself to come back into the office because no one wanted to come to the office anymore. A lot of offices are still working remotely. However, the overhead costs are still there. The rents still have to be paid, the bills still have to be paid. And increasingly, we can have meetings on a virtual platform. So sometimes I wonder, is this a waste of money? Do I even need to have this overhead cost? So if you're describing a firm of the future, what do you think a law firm needs to have? Because COVID has shown that having a beautiful office, that used to be one of the requirements. Even in Nigeria, our rules of professional conduct, it states that you need to have a library, a physical library, an office that has a secretary and, all that stuff. Now we've seen what the reality is. And I hope that the laws will change and our regulations and our rules will change, because I personally think that the office space might be a waste of money, because it doesn't add or increase your productivity. What does one need to have for this firm of the future? Does it have to do with leveraging technology? What else? What is the X factor? I need to know your thoughts on that. We can start with Priya, and then Max and Baha.
I mean, honestly, if I think about it, I think the law firm of the future needs young people. I'm doing a quick shout out to Ethan, who's on this call. He's one of the youngest lawyers at Encode, and I think he's an example of someone who takes things and tests them with you. So there's a way that you work, there's a way that you do things. And someone like Ethan has great ideas and challenges the traditional norms in terms of, what can be done. And I'm also thinking about when we went into lockdown and we were similar, a law firm environment, desks, chairs, meeting rooms, and so on. And the day before we go into lockdown, we're sitting around the boardroom table and we're wondering, how are we going to function with everyone just working from home? And two of the lawyers at Encode said, well, we'll use a gaming platform. And that's what we've done. And we've still been using it. So it's a platform called Discord. And you have different channels and you have different meeting rooms and you can have calls, and it's similar to Teams, but it has so many more features. And hardly anyone would know about it because it's a gaming platform. And so the guys who recommended it are gamers. But it's become completely indispensable to us now, because if you go to a channel, it's the particular client or project that we're working on. You can pin the most recent document on it. We have a history of all the conversations we've had. We put links to the Google Docs in the channel. So if you want to know what's happening with a project, you just click on the channel and you can see the entire history. And so I think the law firm of the future needs to make sure that there's a really good balance age-wise, and that we have young people, but we also give young people room to innovate and challenge the leadership and take us to new heights. You know, they're the ones with ideas, and we are the ones who need to step back a little and give them room to do what they need to do.
Wow, that's really excellent, Priya. Hearing the idea of using the gaming platform as a virtual office space, that's superb. That's really fantastic. You know, so I'll just ride on from where Priya stopped, and I'll say some of the ingredients that are going to building law firm for the future would be innovation, flexibility, but then built on the fundamentals. So we must understand that no matter how far into the future we go, and no matter how far innovation and technology is able to take us, the fundamentals are really important. And increasingly, you need to understand the fundamentals even more when we are in a time of great change and innovation, because it is easy to get carried away with innovation and just get into innovation for innovation's sake and forget that there's actually a reason or a purpose or a fundamental question that you need an answer to that led you to innovation and to technology. So firms still need to understand the basics. You know, who are my clients? So I mean, the basics. I mean, there's what we call the IAO variable. That's interest, attitudes, and opinions. So who are my clients? I mean, Bar did a good job actually of mentioning the fact that her social media persona or her brand on social media is targeted towards her kind of, the kinds of clients she works with and the kind of clients she hopes to, prospectively work with. So firms need to still understand that, when they adopt technology and innovation, really still, sit down, really look at it. Who are my clients? What do they want? What are their interests? What are their opinions? What are their attitudes? That way you can customize your brand to exactly answer those questions so that you're always in the right place at the right time, and, for the right people to find you and engage your services. So I would say, yeah, innovation is good and certainly should be pursued at the point in time we are, but then firms should always go back, understand their basics, your business strategy, just like any other business, and tell yourself, what is my business strategy? Where's the market I'm looking at the moment? What new government regulations is changing, some of my market base, and, how is it increasing? Is it shrinking my market? And some of those fundamental questions, once you answer them, then your innovation should be built on the back of those answers. So I believe that's what a law firm of the future needs. I'm going to specifics of what you need. Then maybe I'll just touch briefly on work from home. Work from home is going to become a huge thing. For me, talking about your challenges with the office space, I had the same challenges just before I went into lockdown. I was racking my brains and thinking about, getting or expanding space. That was in February. I was almost calling up an agent to help me look for, a bigger space. When COVID setting, the lockdown setting, we had to quickly start working from home and flexible working. And after the COVID crisis, we decided, look, guys, why do we want to come back to the office? I mean, come to the office if you need to, but if you don't need to, please work from wherever you are. Just deliver, on what you have to do. So for us, work from home has come to stay. But again, like I tell people, of course, work from home also needs certain rules to govern it. So people need to have certain basics. So I mean, you're working from home, but then you should still know that work hours is 8 to 5. Even if you are working from home, it means you are in work mode from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that means you are dressed up to attend to emergencies if need be, dressed up, to talk to a client in a way you are presentable and able to come across to a client. And then other basic rules about work from home is that, while people work from home also, there's a need to keep in constant touch. I mean, using Discord like Priya and her team have done is excellent, because one of the challenges, and Baha mentioned that, is that we spend a lot of time looking for stuff. Where is the last document? Where's the last draft of this document we sent out to the client? We want to build on that. We can't find it, and lots of those funny things. So using some of these technology tools when you work from home to ensure that communication lines are kept open, because work from home means there's a spatial distance, but then there must be a lot of communication. Otherwise, work from home will lead to a lot of disconnect between team members. So we need to just have that in mind. But I believe it's come to stay, and then any law firm of the future must have some rules around working from home if you really want to go into the future.
Thank you. Baha, how do you think that we should build law firm for the future?
I don't think the law firm of the future will be a law firm. Like it won't resemble what we know as a law firm anymore. I think it will just be I don't know, a startup type that's just providing legal services instead of a product, like the similar way. I think the legal industry is way too different than any other fast growing functional industry. Like the way we do things, our accounting rules, our ethical rules, our advertising rules, our procedural rules, like everything. We're lawyers, we like rules. So we've always separated ourselves and made up like what works for us. But I think the law firm of the future will be like any other standard business, except they provide legal services. They'll mix a little bit more with other professions. I think diversity is missing. That's a reason why legal industry is so special. So some of these technology people, these AI people that we're talking about are going to be like standing positions in law firm when they start to understand they need the infrastructure. I think some positions like social media managers and things that we wouldn't think about are going to be huge positions within the law firm. So the diversity by itself. And I really think legal services are going to stop being so special and one-off. I think though they will be productized. Like, for example, you should be able to buy a contract, like an employment contract with just your basic clauses like you do now with Zoom, but there's too much discrepancy with non-lawyers and lawyers. I think the law firm of the future is kind of in the middle of a law firm and what's considered now like a legal service provider. And I think law firms of the future, especially after the pandemic, will be smaller. I don't think we're going to have so many big businesses only going for the top 10 or 20. Like at least my experience of working with Fortune 500, they're looking at a lot of other smaller firms just because the small firms now have the technology infrastructure to actually give data back. Like here's the amount of hours, here's our, our percentages, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the local expertise and the lack of travel will lead to a lot more small specialized firms. So there's a lot of opportunity for new and young lawyers to get businesses that they wouldn't have gotten before. And as far as the whole work from home thing, personally, I don't like boxes. I don't like when something is just a yes or no, or this is possible, this is impossible. So going to having to do work from home or everybody working from home, I also don't think is realistic because people's personality types are different. Some people still thrive in a community and office environment. Some people need to split. Some clients still need to meet. So I think there's going to be a lot more like shared space where there's no assigned seating. So companies do have enough space to accommodate, but they will allow work from home as a real alternative. And for my purposes, like for my personality type, working from home, I always work more than when I worked at the office because the 8 hours at the office is also lunch, it's chatting with people at the water cooler, it's taking phone calls, it's taking meetings. But working from home, I might go get a coffee, but my work day is like 10 or 12 hours, especially now that people, you're home a lot, so you don't have as much of a distraction as before. So this cultural change of who we are as people, like I know who I am now as a human being, like forget about the lawyer. As a human being is not the same person I was 6 months ago. So my personal culture in my home, with my family, with my clients, with my friends has completely changed. That will contribute to an entire cultural shift that we don't know. So talking about like what was or kind of what is helpful. We know where we came from, but it's more so of what we're actually doing that's going to create the culture. So if I'm okay now, like this is my home office, across the hall here is my bedroom. So this is my office and I've gotten used to it, and my clients have gotten used to this. This is it. We talk all the time. They see this background. We're always on time, with our clients. We share the documents. My team is functional. That kind of cultural resistance in the minds of the clients shift. Like you got to do what you got to do and they'll adjust. So let's not really worry about what and how people will adjust, how courts will adjust. Like We can make up our own alternative and do it. And Marks, I really want to tell you, like with what you say about the judge, I would genuinely type my argument and put it in front of him and say, you don't have to type it. Here's a copy. Like kind of like the olden days where people would bring the carbon thing that would transfer to another page. These are creative human solutions. Technology and politics will follow, because for courts to adopt technology, it will take like 2 years. A lot of people have to get bribed and like all of this process. And by the time we see it, that's a lot of energy to put to a big cause. And I know that's the cause to some people who are willing to invest their time and energy. For my type of a cause, it's always easier to change, like be the change you wish to see in the world. Like change the way you do things and don't explain yourself, just do. That will happen. And give that advice to other people if it works for you. Like genuinely share that advice to help. Like some of the things that's helpful for me, Law Firm of the Future, I built my own app over, I'm not a coder. I understand technology because I like to read. I don't actually understand how it's done or know how to do it. I found by just research this platform that's a no code platform, just drag and drop. So I did my own customer journey map and I, through drag and drop, built my own app. You know, I don't have $1 million to want to invest in app development, and I don't want to go hire developers or raise investments. That will take 2 years. So what was my alternative solution? Something that's not even for lawyers. It's just an app for anyone who wants to build an app. Like it's called Adolo. Most people use it for food delivery. I just broke down my process in a way that fits that. So if it's a restaurant's delivering, mostly building apps, I broke down my contract into clauses like food toppings that people can choose. Yes, I want to give my employee vacation. No, I don't want to pay them overtime. And it's literally like contract clauses. That wasn't something that existed. I made it up to see if contract clauses could work as like food toppings. Like it's recommended, you know, kind of, if you want to, optional clauses and something that they request. And it actually ended up working out. It's not done yet. So when it's done, I'll share it with everyone, but it worked. And the only reason I did it because I had time and I was home and it's a pandemic and I didn't want to invest any more money. So if we do these for ourselves, like if we help ourselves, and we're not going to sit there and wait for someone to come and drag along this legal boat to some world that works. And that's the same way with laws. Like we can go argue to say, you know, our case has to win because this is the law and the law is so unclear. Like we're having in the US this problem with our constitutional law. Our constitution is so unclear that the population is divided and they're worried about who gets elected to the Supreme Court. So if we're relying so much on one person's interpretation, that means our constitution is outdated. So is a better solution to spend, you know, millions lobbying a process that doesn't work, or update the constitution, like go through the proper process to amend the constitution. That's a change that's in the control of people. So Law Firm of the Future will be to do whatever the hell you want. Like stop worrying of what people think, what you should do. Like if I wanted to do what the US industry wants me to do, I wouldn't be a lawyer. Like I'm one of only 35% of lawyers who are women. Like only 35% of lawyers in the US are women, and a fraction of that minority. Like I'm a minority here. I was originally born and raised in Iran, and there's a lot of racism in the legal industry. Why does it matter? Like my hair is blonde and I have an Instagram profile. Like to some people that might be inspiring and they want to know what I'm doing. There is a whole other section of the world that thinks this girl is crazy and what she says will never come true and she's wasting her time. Does it matter to me? No. They can go comment on my pictures and like it. It is what it is. So you kind of have to take a thick skin and know whatever is happening might not happen again, might be really different, or you have to change it. Like I think the pandemic just gave us a thick skin, and to maintain your thick skin and keep going with the unknown, because no matter what's going to happen after the pandemic of tradition coming back, the unknown is your friend to innovate. So use that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for those powerful points. Really happy that you've expressed yourself so articulately. And it leads me to my next question, which has to do with the role of gender and also cultural backgrounds. You've spoken from your perspective, but I'd like others to speak as well. And we also had a question on that, which was basically around, let me just find that question. It said, I'm curious about how the cultural gender background affect the practice of the panelists. And there are things about their practice that is shaped by their cultural background. So Priya, I'd like you to speak on that. Obviously, you're a woman, you know, founding and managing a law firm. What would you say inspired you to, and how do we increase, you know, women in the leadership? There are lots of women on the bottom, but when it comes to leadership, there are few women. What needs to be done to change that narrative?
Shania, I think they should just do what you do. So they should take their cue from you. But on a serious note, I think that you know, especially years ago, because you could have a double whammy of being a woman, but also being young, and also being and non-white. So it's actually a triple whammy. And you feel as if you're on this treadmill, but you have to just run faster and faster and faster to keep up. So your input is 3 times as much. You know, what would be, you know, I'm generalizing, but what might be a little easier for a white, older male. So I think that there are those dynamics that you have to contend with. But I think Bahar put it so beautifully, which is that, you know, you just have to focus on where you're getting to, and you know what it is that you're defining, and who you are and what you're bringing, instead of looking at all the things that you're not. And I think, you know, we can get so caught up in all the things that we're not, that we forget what we do bring to the table. So play to your strengths. You know, I've been in conversations where you do get the feeling that the client is asking, is she strong enough for this kind of battle? You know, does she have the kind of grit? Because I don't know her in the same way that I know this guy that I've had beer with, or that, you know, that we've played golf with, and so on. So if I am placing this much confidence, can she go the distance? Can she deliver? And so on. And I think those questions can either be answered in the positive or the negative, and you walk away with the people that do have that confidence, and the clients that do express that confidence and faith in you, and you go on to have excellent relationships with them. And at the same time, you know, don't sweat the ones you lose, because you will have those that are not compatible with who you are and what you bring to the table. And they're going to find a different lawyer, and that's the one that works for them. So all those dynamics do come into play. They come into play on a daily basis. And if it isn't the one, then it is the other. But for me, it's just about where you're going instead of all the things that you're not.
Thank you, Priya. We're going to be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes. We have a question here, and I'll just address that question to Max and any other person who wants to answer as well. I would also urge you guys to keep your answers to about 1 minute, because we'd like to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. It's been a great conversation so far. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. Thank you for all the comments. And I'll just read this question from Ava Kimani. And she says, thank you to all the speakers for sharing their great insights. My question is to Baha, but any speaker can respond. Would you advise that lawyers who intend to be in the tech space to also get some skills in how the tech works, e.g. in AI coding, etc.? For example, when advising on issues such as ethics in AI, algorithms in the context of competition law, etc., an understanding of how this tech works seems to be key to advising on it. the context for the question in my own experience, I'm a commercial lawyer and I have a background in programming. I work with a lot of startups here in Kenya, especially in tech, fintech, and I have come to realize that understanding how the tech works is quite a value addition when providing accurate advice and to draft better clauses in contracts. So that's for you, Baha, but other panelists can feel free to add any points they have.
I think, I've always advised against going to just get programming skills and like learning how to do things to actually do something for yourself, because there's a reason they're experts in everything. Sometimes it saves more time and money, but in your specific case, you're asking because of the type of work that you do and how to relate more to your clients. Like, I don't know specifically, I've never done it, and I worked in the IT industry, so I've survived well and understood. If it's something you're actually interested in, like, I'm all for additional education. Like my personal desire to gain a lot of knowledge is really high. So I would go the extra mile if it's something that you want to do. But if you're staying in that field, not just understanding that technology, but kind of how they play out with other types of technologies in the same industry could be helpful. I still stress that it's more important to understand the logic of it, so you can understand the logic and the application of the law versus to be able to do it. But of course, practice is what makes perfect. So if you have the time to dedicate to learn, that's great. And there's just one quote, like, Priya, you said everything about this gender stuff so beautifully. Like, when I started, I got one piece of advice, which was, if a flower isn't blooming, you don't change the flower, you change its environment. So sometimes you just because the culture is wrong, you don't need to fight your way. You can just change where you are in an environment that's more adaptive to you, because this change in our culture with gender gaps is going to go on for years to come.
Thank you so much, Baha. At this point, I'm going to ask all the panelists to give us their closing remarks. And if there's any other topics that we didn't touch on, I'd also like Max to talk about some of the takeaways from the IBA conference that he recently attended. And so we'll start with Baha. Sorry, we'll start with Max to give us your closing remarks and your takeaways from the IBA conference. And then we'll go to Priya, and then Baha, and then myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I've really enjoyed doing this webinar. Thanks to Baha and to Priya, and of course, Chineke, to you. I've really enjoyed the insights here. So just for my closing thoughts, I would say, looking back at the topic, the law firm of the future, I believe we are on, route to that. We are seeing that law firm of the future. Before the interruption of COVID, we had trending topics, of course, AI. We had the gig economy, Uberization of legal services, and how the big law was broken down, new law, and then all of that. Of course, COVID has kind of stopped some of those conversations in their track. I'm sure at some point we'll pick up with some of those conversations, but of course with modifications. But it's important. And then just to add a few things to the last question Baha took. Yeah, personally, I also learned a little bit of programming, a little bit of coding, just enough, like you said, to know the logic. So when I discuss with you, I understand some of your pains in that unique area. Of course, there are certain kinds of work you go into. For instance, patent drafting. You have to actually be a specialist in that area to be able to draft a patent that would stand the test of time, in terms of it, the innovation or the invention in relation. But beyond that, sometimes I've seen this also as another. I always talk about balance. Sometimes I've seen lawyers try to know more about the field than the professionals themselves, and actually begin to almost argue about technical issues. I think sometimes that goes too far. And what I do personally is that no matter how much I know about the technology, I quickly circle back the conversation. After saying a few things about the technology, I circle back to what my work is to you, how the law impacts what you are doing, because that is my primary purpose there. I'm not there to really talk the technology with you and all of that, just to let you know I understand some of it or enough about it to know what to do in terms of how to structure the law to best safeguard, the work that you are doing. And then just to close on, I had the privilege of speaking at the IBA conference just last week on a panel together by the Law Firm Management Committee of the International Bar Association. And there was actually a questionnaire they did just to find out what it would take for sustainability of small and medium law firms, going forward post the pandemic and all. And one of the things that came out big in that survey actually was fueled 31% by law firms with 0 to 10 lawyers in-house in the firm actually. So it was, I think it's really relevant to, to small and medium law firms, or developing law firms as I prefer to call them. But what stood out was that lots of them did not pick technology as the main factor for actually client service satisfaction of the client. So I think it's important that we note that going forward, no matter how much technology means to us, and technology is actually good, but then we remember the basics. You have to satisfy your clients. You have to deliver a good job, and that really is what gets the job done. No matter how far into the future we go, satisfying the client always remains the primary purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya.
No, I think I've been inspired by what some of the other panelists have been saying. And I think what stands out for me is that we can't escape the need to bring a sense of industry, a sense of efficiency to what we do. I think we've been hiding behind this factory type model where you go to work and you make as many dresses as you can. There are often times, and I'm sure the other lawyers would have experienced it, where you've worked so hard drafting that your arm is kind of frozen. So there's something wrong with the way we're practicing law. Surely there are efficiencies, there are things that can be automated and can be done better. So I think it's just high time for the future of the law, and maybe even for our continued survival, that we bring a sense of industry and efficiency to the profession. And then, and concluding thoughts have to just be, thank you, Chinenye. I'm inspired every time I speak to you. It's so amazing, and so is the firm. So thank you so much for the invitation and having me join this evening. Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you, Baha.
I think I've had a lot to say, so I will keep this last part short. I think my biggest advice is just to keep an open mind and look forward instead of looking back, and look around. Like, if there's anything in other industries that's working and that's fun, who cares if it wasn't in legal? Like, bring it in, look in the future of what you think should be, and bring it in now. Like, that's my, keep an open mind. It's the most important advice I could give anyone. And thank you for putting this together. It was a really interesting conversations. We don't get a lot of those with the pandemic, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's been amazing having you guys. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this panel. I want to quickly take 2 minutes to just talk about the FEMA Advisory and myself. I didn't get to do that at the beginning of the webinar. So you all know my name is Chine Wanaka. I'm managing partner of the FEMA Advisory, which is a boutique law and consulting firm here in Nigeria. We also have affiliate firms in the UK and in the US. You can see my profile is being shown right now. So some of our practice areas are obviously information technology law, energy law, intellectual property, and so on and so forth. I am very passionate about public policy, and I basically went to Harvard last year to do an executive program on implementing public policy. I also wear multiple hats. I'm a thematic lead for innovation and intellectual property for the National Assembly Business Environment Roundtable. It's basically, in the role, we basically help government and the legislature to push forward bills that have to do with innovation and IP. In Nigeria, we have a lot of obsolete laws that are from the 50s and 60s. And basically, just give me 1 second. And basically, we have to basically get involved in the process of lawmaking and review existing bills and try and propose solutions to any problems or gaps that might be in the laws. apart from that, I'm a co-founder of Africa Policy Conversations, which is a platform for professionals across the continent to talk about policy problems that affect each country and also engage with the policymakers in order to, Now, a bit about the FEMA advisory. These are some of the services that we offer. We review contracts, business advisory, we do litigation, arbitration, and so on and so forth. We have a very young team, a young dynamic team. And as you can see, we have our corporate arm, we have our dispute resolution arm, and public policy as well. We're also very passionate about giving back. We do so much in that space. We have our Access to Justice initiative, and we do a lot to give back to society. We've won several awards, and we help with, that's the Vice President of Nigeria, by the way, for those who don't know. And that's an award that I received 2 years ago for the firm, for our Access to Justice initiative. So we offer pro bono legal services to indigent members of society, and we just try our best to make an impact whichever way that we can. And basically, we like to hold these kind of conversations about interesting topics. We believe in collaborating and reaching out to like-minded people across the world. And yeah, we're looking forward to more conversations like this. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our clients. Thank you to our collaborators. Thank you to our speakers today. You guys have been amazing. Thank you to all the participants that joined. And on this note, I'm going to say good night, everyone. I wish. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and it's goodbye from Abuja, Nigeria.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day, everyone.